Hi there, everybody. My name is Christopher Bell, and I am the librarian and the technology coordinator for the high school at International School Bangkok. I'm originally from Colorado. I did 10 years of teaching and educating there. I was a librarian there for 8 of those years, and ended up deciding to go overseas and ended up in a few different places. I've worked in Japan, I've worked in the Middle East, and I really like it here where I've been for a while now. This job, working with both of these positions, has been really fun and really made the integration of technology into a lot of the library work I do fantastic. The school that I work at is all in English. We are primarily serving some of the bigger business and embassy students that are here in Thailand. And the curriculum is all American. We have AP and IB coursework that we do here. And the expectations are fairly high. Students usually matriculate to about 75% of them matriculate to the States, and the rest further around the world. And so it's a pretty cool place. I feel pretty lucky to be able to work here and do the things I've done. I've shared this presentation now with several different organizations and talked through it and really enjoyed the conversations that I got. Normally, I would be excited to be having you kind of question me as we go along, but because I am in Thailand, this would be 3 a.m. in the morning, and I would much rather be in bed, and you don't want to hear me at 3 a.m. So let's get on with it. That was a little bit about me. Um, so I'm presenting on AI as a thought partner for student research. And I think it's really important that we start to think about AI with a different light, and we start to really consider the benefits and the things that students can get out of it. And I feel like from what I'm reading and from the research that I'm studying, that we're slowly moving that way as educators. That idea of the cheating being the scariest thing, and us spending all of our time, energy, and money worrying about the cheating is something that's still obviously there and still something we really need to pay attention to. But I think at the same time, the movement towards usage and good usage opens the doors for librarians to actually step in and do what we're really good at. And that is that idea of sharing how to find information, how to ask really, really good questions in an excellent manner and in a way that is effective for kids. So this idea as a thought partner and thing, not necessarily my own. It comes from a lot of different places and that kind of thing, but I'm going to share it with you and how we've done it here at ISB. So let's get on with it. So the idea and the application to use AI as a collaborative partner. In doing some research around things, one of the big things is, as I said, moving away from that idea or moving past that idea, is what I should say, of worry and what's going to happen, and into the realm of how can we use it? How can we leverage it, right? And so this idea of teachers facilitating exploration and guiding students to leverage AI to get those human qualities that maybe went by the wayside. And in talking with my colleagues and whatnot, that idea of, for example, a lot of this came out of that idea of, we used to have peer editing in everything. Every paper you wrote, every little bit you wrote, we had peer editing. And then we got so heavy on a lot of the content and things that there wasn't time for that anymore. What's been really interesting for me is I also teach the AP research class here, and being able now to say, here is a gem, for example, that I want you all to build that will work to provide you that peer feedback, that talking or sounding board, has been really cool to see and use. At the same time, we have very clear instructions. None of what goes into that can show up in their papers. But that idea of having somebody to talk to about your ideas is still something that I think students find valuable. So with that, we kind of try and learn how to reteach. And again, as I said, this is a great way for librarians to step into the picture and share the skills that we're really good at. I liken it back to the time when Google came out and people said, sure, kids just know how to do it. And for the most part, they could make it work, sure. But what we soon found out, and I would say largely the librarian community found out, was they could use it, but they aren't using it well, efficiently, and they aren't finding and asking the questions they need to be asking. And that's where I felt like I got to step in as a librarian and really start working with students around formulating those ideas. So this whole thing comes out of what we've created here at ISB, which is like our research process. I'm sure you all have research processes that you teach students. It's kind of what I feel like is a gold standard, a means for kids to understand how, when they're doing any research or actually just looking for even good question or good answers, this is how we get there. And so for us, we used an acronym that we thought was kind of neat, WAVES of Curiosity. And I should say that this is not my own. This is developed. This was developed with myself and the middle school librarian. And we wanted to have continuity and articulation across the two schools with our students. And so both of us worked on this. We spent a year auditing the standards that we had in place, which were the AASL standards. We wanted to mesh in some of the ISTE standards to get some of the technology in there. And then we crosswalked a bunch of other standards. The great people in Michigan, in Colorado, and in Texas, some really great standards there that we found. So if there's anybody from there, kudos, we loved your work, and we built off of it, we felt like. So we, again, just kind of honed in on what we thought it would work best for us, and we've got this wave. And so when we explain it, the idea is this, that, you start out wondering, and that's that wave kind of curling along. And then you start to acquire things, and that's that wave building up steam and starting to get a little higher. And we know that starts to kind of really make noise when it hits the shore, even because it's got meat to it, it's got stuff to it, right? But an important part of that is then finding out the right thing, and finding out and verifying those resources for what they are, or the analysis, if you will, of that kind of thing. And then the execute, which is always kind of, how do we organize our ideas? How do we put our ideas together so that we can we get a good result in the end, and for us sharing. And that whole idea of the wave is like, if you hit any one of those letters and don't feel good about it, don't come to a good solution, don't get the answer you want, that wave crashes down and we move back to a start point and we wonder again. So again, this was what we used, and we really liked it, and we started really leaning into this, and this was probably about 3 years ago. So right before AI kind of hits education or hits everybody, we had this new research process we were super excited about. And then AI came along, right? And it was like, oh my gosh, all the writing, all the research, all those things, now AI is just going to do it all for us. And we initially were like, what can we do? How do we address this? And so I worked with my administration, and we put together our first kind of AI policy 3.5 years ago now. So basically, I finished that waves thing, and we moved directly into like an AI policy to protect against the overuse and that kind of thing. And I was really pleased with this one. It mirrors a lot of the others, again, that we saw going around, floating around. That idea of just making sure kids understood that AI wasn't going to give them all the answers, and that they should question what they get out of AI. We really, as you could see, the biggest box there turned into the yellow box, which was this: cautiously use the information, confirm its accuracy, build more with that tool, and create your own work from it. Don't let it create work for you. So this was our first one, and I've linked in our high school policy initially. And it's funny to look back, just even those few years, where we were, you can tell, was this idea of like, wow, we've got to put in place some rules and some regulations to protect and to make sure that students aren't using it poorly and cheating, right? That was what we were really all worried about and wanted to make sure we were that way. While this served that purpose, something really started to become evident, and that was this idea of like, okay, so here's this powerful tool, and we're literally using a stoplight to talk about it. And that's, what message does that send? And are we really leaning into it? In the meantime, I had started really working on developing like ways and means for kids to see research in action and work with questions and that kind of thing. And so it really made us come back to this and say, like, maybe we need to take an approach of usage like, how do we use it, right? And that was exciting. That was really exciting. And that turned us to this. This is where we got to, was now we use this usage of AI. And the whole idea here, this was created with teachers, with administrators, with students. The whole idea is leveraging AI, but all being on the same page, understanding when we can use it, what level of use we can use, and what those expectations can be if we do use it. For me as the librarian, what really got exciting was that third block down, which was the AI for support and ideation. In our discussions, one of the big focuses that I was able to kind of leverage and bring in to bear was this idea of like, look, that thought partner piece, that piece of me saying, hey, does this sound like a good idea? Hey, am I on the right track? Or can you help me think of some other ways that I might approach this? That was big. That was really big. And again, nothing from that actually coming into my actual work or content. We really started to kind of hone in on the verbiage, but that idea of like, what if I use it to embolden my own work? And so this quickly turned into, okay, we use Google Gemini. This is not Gemini specific, and I'm not going to show you how to use Gemini. It's just that that's the one we use here, and it's because of Google's linkage into the whole privacy and security thing for us. And we were already a Google school. So the idea is that any AI will work here, but we use Google Gemini. And it was to start thinking about how could I take that second step of the wave and really use AI to help me acquire and use AI to start analyzing. So even that third step on the wave to the resources that I'm getting, right? And so we tried some things. And one of the first things we tried was, here's the prompt, right? And again, you can use this prompt as you like or as you see fit, but you're a high school student at an international school. You have the task, and you could put any kind of task in there. Sometimes it was to write a summary. Sometimes it was to help me understand something, whatever it might be. We would tell them to give it some specific ideas, and then we wanted them to make sure that they understood that this is to provide you with some different thinking or perspectives, right? And so there's the prompt we gave to different departments. So for me, that was English, social studies, and science. And they took this and used it with students to see how it worked out. And it was really pretty cool. But we felt like we still needed more guidance. It was a little too wobbly as far as like what they got back and not clear. That said, one of my first goals was to start teaching how to prompt. And you probably, again, this is one of those things that blew up on the web. Everybody was sharing their prompts. Everybody was sharing how they do it and all those different things. And so this is an outcropping of that process of like, okay, so rather than have students saying, tell me about the physics behind Bernoulli's laws, right? That's not a great question. That is really just going to give you some generic answer back that really they could have probably gone to Wikipedia and found. So we wanted to make sure they understood, like, you can't just say silly things like you could into Google because you'll get the same kind of results, lax or broad kind of results. So we said, all right, we got to dig down a little bit deeper than just teaching them to prompt. So we tried to give them a template. And for me, I'm a big fan of a template. They work well for me. And so we said, okay, let's create a student research guide so that all the time they have the tools in their hands, but let's guide them a little bit. The other thing that I really dove into was this idea of question creation. When we audited our standards, there were a couple of our implementation of the AASL standards, or a couple of things that came out or really reflected poorly was who's teaching questions? Who's teaching how to ask or how to develop questions? And funny enough, from grade 6 to 12, almost nobody was explicitly teaching question writing, and absolutely nobody was assessing the caliber or quality. And so, wow, here's a giant hole in our process. The second one, if you wanted to know, was note-taking. Oddly enough, we didn't do that either. So those were the two big work spots. And so this chart was a response to that. This idea of, okay, let's get them started wondering. That's a pretty easy thing to do. We gave them the waves model there at the top so that they would know what to do. And we would literally start them off with, all right, put your big, wide-ranging topic up there. Put several in there though. Let's get some thinking going. Then we took that prompt idea, we refined it a little bit and put that right in the next box, right? And this is where the thought partner and if I'm honest, that I felt the magic came. You could drop a pin in the room and hear it because kids would get in there, they'd put that in, and all of a sudden, their idea, their crazy, wild, broad idea, they're wondering, had turned into something. A lot of times it wasn't great, but it was something now because they had taken that idea and popped it into this prompt, almost like a Mad Lib, if you remember Mad Libs, right? And that's what we call taking it out for a spin or trying it out, seeing what would come back from the AI. So our goal was to get some different perspectives on the idea, right? That process actually ended up taking much, much longer in class than we thought because you could just see the kids getting engrossed and enriched and having conversations with the AI about what this main idea was and where they wanted to go. So it was exciting. We actually ended up having to say, all right, time out, time out. Let's come back now with what we know and let's build a question. And so that's where we got into this bit of question building. And so for me, what I did, and again, I've linked this in here for you, was let's go back to the basics. Question stem, how, to what extent, why, what is the impact, right? We take that question stem and we find something we want to know about, something we want to do. And for middle school, it was like the ing words, you know, we want to be analyzing something, we want to be evaluating something or summarizing something, right? And so we get to that point and then the inquiry. Now jump back up to your wonder. What was it you were thinking about? What did that AI say, right? And we wanted them to really understand that a question isn't just, hey, I want to know about Bernoulli's law. That's fine. That's fine. But that's not an academic question. We said an academic question has the last little bit. And that is this idea of like, what do you think? What's your thought? Or how do you want to see it help? And so that's where we got this demonstration piece in. So we really kind of created this formula for students. In high school, obviously, that's where I sit and that's where I work. So it's a little more advanced. We gave some deeper examples here. And this is mine, so I wanted to make sure you got that. So it's a little bit more specific and a little more tailored to higher thinking. But yeah, let's do that. And then what we did was the very next thing was this feasibility test. So now let's take that question. Let's take the rubric that you've got and let's see if they marry together and see what happens. The magic on this one happened when I used it with the extended essay kids. I had them put in their question. We went through this process, right, of developing. We went through and built some questions. And then we threw in that question against the extended essay rubric. And with the words, and I'll tell you the secret to this whole thing, with the words conduct a feasibility test, you almost always got the same kind of format to come out. It was super cool. It basically would say, it would give them the strengths of their question based on that rubric. It would give them ideas around improvements. So maybe you were weak in the area of organization. Maybe you were strong in the area of analysis, but your understanding or knowledge of understanding is going to be tough or weak. You may not find resources here. It was really amazing and intuitive. At this point, we're still not looking at the accuracy of that, and we're not looking for content. All we're looking at is like, does this question or can this question meet the criteria for that? And I'll tell you, the biggest thing we saw was a change in student mentality. So most of my students go through the IB program and end up doing the extended essay. And so, you know, I'll see over 100 kids to do this. And where they used to come out of that question building session a little bit, if I'm honest with myself, a little bit downtrodden. I think because the reality of how difficult the question was going to be, how they were going to have to work with that question, refine that question, continue building, was daunting. And after talking with some kids, this was their response, was this idea that like, wow, I just feel like I don't know where to go from here. The difference was after they had done this feasibility test, it clearly told them where the strengths and weaknesses were, and they felt knowledgeable. They knew that there was going to be more work ahead, but they felt like they knew what work. Their attitudes were different. Their whole person had changed around this idea of like, hey, I have a question that I might be able to dive into. All of that came from the time they spent beating around their new idea or their wondering and chatting with the AI about what that question, what they really wanted to get into with that question, right? And what their goal was to get these different perspectives on that idea. It was an amazing thing. So from there, then it went into this idea of, okay, let's go get some high quality resources. Well, as many of you would know, if you don't know, I hope you will know. Um, if you just put in "give me resources" into any AI, if you say "give me resources about Bernoulli's law," well, that's that's maybe going to give you some good resources, maybe not, and that's a problem, right? It turns into a really great teaching moment about evaluation of sources. And that's what I did. So I said, okay, let's go look and see what happens. So we would do a side-by-side comparison. We would do a Google search and then we would do an AI search. And then we would start to look at them, right? And I tell them, take the first 3, 4 resources you find and let's evaluate them. And we use the CRAP test. It's still good, no matter what anybody says. I still think it's valuable in a sense. But we liked that. But what really came out of that was, hey, I'm not sure I'm asking the right question, Mr. Bell, which was like, yes, we were getting there. We're questioning our questions, right? And it was really a good moment for me as a teacher. And then also, I think the kids really started doing that. And so we decided we wanted to be better at prompting, right? We wanted to be more specific. And so I built another acronym for them. And this time we wanted to make sure that we were clear and sensible about our search for resources. And so to do that, I built robust, because we said we want robust resources, right? So what do those really look like? Well, we wanted to be reliable. And so we said, okay, so if we're going to look at something in science and we're going to look at something like Bernoulli, well, then don't we want, like, wouldn't it be good if the AI had the persona of an aeronautical engineer or just an engineer, right? That idea really struck a chord with kids a little bit. They even started looking at, like, who would be the right person for this. Okay, so now we've got reliability. Then we knew we needed to be more objective, right? And so the idea here is, like, making sure that what you write into that prompt is very, very specific and clear. I need to know how the principles impact the design of airplane wings, right? Or the change in an airplane wing. I'm using this example because there's one fresh in my head. The kid wanted to know about why the edge of a wing on an airplane now is turned up and why some aren't. And so that idea really was, I want to know, it must create benefit somehow. I want to know how, right? And that's where his whole idea started from. Okay, then boost. So boost is a cool one. Boost was this idea of thinking about, like, okay, so if I'm looking at airplane wings, I really need to say, like, passenger airplanes, right? Because really, do we ever see those wings like that on small planes or on military planes? No, I got to think about this. I need to be really specific and differentiate my answer by boosting it up a little bit and giving it something really specific, right? That this is going to be on passenger planes. And that led right into this unique piece. So passenger planes, but what is it about that makes it more valuable? Is it that it saves fuel? Is it that it doesn't take as much energy to get off the ground? Is it that we can have less draw on the engines? Can we fly higher? Who knows? But that unique thing that he wanted to look into, that's where we started digging in, right? And then the specific resources. This was awesome because I said, when we talk to the AI, we don't just want to say, go out and get stuff. We want to provide it some really high quality stuff so that we can say, like the resources I'm providing you, or similar or newer resources, or older ones. This is where we talked about, what does it mean to have the seminal paper on something? It was a really amazing moment because I said, you can't just put nothing in there. You need to give it a knowledge base, and that knowledge base needs to have 3 or 4 resources that you would definitely use, that you have evaluated, you have thought about. So, okay, we get that. And then the think. And this is the part where it was like, you can't take anything for granted. You have to evaluate what it gives you. You have to think about, how does it reflect to you and what is it? Now, Underlying all of this, we keep pushing or driving home that idea that none of this is content. Nothing that we're finding, nothing that we're using so far is content. All we are actually doing is thinking and developing our ideas and making things more specific and then getting some resources around that. Okay? So I'm coming towards the end here. This was the feasibility prompt. I wanted you to make sure you had this for the extended essay. I even linked in the rubric there. I gave you some examples in here so that you could see the responses because it's very, very powerful. And like I said, I think it was pretty neat for the kids to see. So small idea for you. Hopefully it's something you can take away and use with your kids, modify for your student population. I will say there were two big things for me that I wanted to mention in this presentation. And one was that idea of shifting the mindset from this like worry, anxiety, that kind of stuff to let's leverage it, let's use it, right? That changed the way the approach happened. The other thing was that approaching a big project for kids, I had never really paid attention to that their physical or kind of even their mental response to getting a project like an extended essay that's going to take over a year to complete, right? And that out right out of the start, making them feel positive and like there's potential there. That was a game changer for me, those two things. So even if you're still worried about what they might produce out of here and that kind of thing, maybe dabble in it, maybe give it a try, but start with them just conversing, just having a conversation with the AI to see what comes. So I hope some of this resonates. Back to that slide to show you. And again, I'm Chris Bell, and reach out and tell me what you're doing with AI because I want new ideas. I want fresh ideas. Take care and all the very best to you. I really appreciate San Jose State here, University for partnering with them. It's a great school. I have several friends that went to library school there, and I know some of the professors there. It's a great place, and I'm really appreciative of their work. As I said, hopefully this is great and helped you. I'll just